Well, joining us in the studio live to discuss this, Dr Paul Toyne. He's an expert on the science and politics of climate change and advises both the government and businesses on how best to combat global warming. Thank you for coming in. So where are we? How much progress have we made in the last 5-6 months since G8 summit?
Well, one of the outcomes of that G8 summit was actually, firstly, a recognition that climate change was happening and that it was actually influenced by humans, by activity. And that may sound surprising, but you actually need to start on that basis. Then we need to have the scientific evidence that suggests what needs to happen, at what levels can we live in terms of CO2 contributions or concentrations in the atmosphere. That's also been established. Now, the next step is actually a dialogue to start to describe or discuss ways in which we can adapt and adjust to life in a high carbon society, but actually change and make that transition from high carbon society to a low carbon society. So what does that mean? It means things like exploring new technologies, exchanging new technologies with some of the developing countries like China and India, which are actually involved in the discussions today.
Yes, they're alongside the sort of G8 energy ministers who are going to be at this meeting. So what kind of new technologies are we talking about?
Well, if you think about renewable energy, this is energy that doesn't have carbon in, so it's solar, it's wind, it's those types of technologies, and even actually using carbon-based energy such as coal, which if we traditionally use coal in coal power stations, it's incredibly high in carbon, so very dirty in terms of pollution. And the big concern is a lot of developing countries are going to power their own economic development through coal, for example, India and China. So it's desperately important that if they are going to use coal, they use it in the most appropriate way, so they clean the emissions that are coming out. So we're talking about capturing carbon and storing it.
So you're talking about the fact that the next few days we're going to be talking about new technology, but we're not actually going to be setting targets because we really need to analyse what the new technology is before we set those targets.
No, the situation was that we have something called the Kyoto Protocol, which the UK and other countries have ratified and signed up to. That takes us up to 2012 and doesn't involve developing countries, those countries which are involved in the talks today, such as India, Brazil and China. And it's imperative that they start to explore ways in which they can reduce their carbon dioxide emissions, so that when we start to discuss, which will happen in Montreal at the end of this month, what happens after Kyoto, that's when we start to discuss the setting of targets. And then they'll be able to develop an action plan which is based on the best available evidence, so they can actually take action. So the setting of targets needs to happen with everybody included, not just the G8 and 5 other nations.
And for them to listen, we have to hope that we're listening as well. Dr Paul Toyne, we're going to leave it there for now. Thank you very much indeed.